Among the very busy bunch of Seiko 5 sports pieces which have undergone massive changes over the last several years, there sits an exhaustive list of different flavors of the design that pay reverence to the 1960s Seiko 5 Sportsmatic. Yet of all the models marked with the Seiko 5 insignia, the least discussed segment of the modern 5 catalog has to be the SRPJ and the SRPH pilot watches. In this video, we take a closer look at these and understand their misconstrued positioning and where they stack up amongst them all. Now, although Seiko has had its fair share of pieces from its past that were notable in aviation timekeeping, let's bring up watches like the Flightmaster, the Pogue. All this considered, these feats often are overshadowed by the brand's impact in other areas such as diving. Now, nevertheless, the core attributes of Seiko's established aviation heritage have lived on for years, even within the Seiko 5 collection. When I was first getting into the hobby, one of those pieces that were served up as this collector starter pack was the SNK 800 series. These pieces were everywhere. You would see them talked about on social media all the time, and they were defined by their smaller 37mm cases, 4 o'clock crown position, orientation triangle, leaf style hands, and circular lined enclosure for the hours with larger numerals for the minutes sitting outside, while giving you a view of that 7S26 caliber on the reverse side, which might not be a great looking caliber, but as your first automatic, which this watch often was, it was great to be able to see. Its simple yet unquestionable looks for the time made for unquestionable value, but have since been discontinued, making for a less compelling concept of value given the higher prices as a result of lack of availability of former years. With them now trading, it seems like, into the hundreds of dollars when these watches were commonly closer to $100. In its place now sit models known as the SRPH and the SRPJs, which will vary in case finish, dimensions, and with the updated 4R calibers. Now, part of the reason for these watches being overlooked, I believe, has come as a byproduct of Seiko's positioning or lack of positioning in the right manner. Now, underneath the Seiko 5 Sports Collection, there are 3 subcategories designated by Seiko. The first one is going to be the SKX case models, which basically speak for themselves. They have the SKX silhouette, and they're the largest of the 3 by a wide margin. Then you have another group that, honestly, it's kind of strange that this is its own group, but this is on the Seiko website. They have the SNXS group with its retro case design and being more of a recent recreation from the brand. And then the final one is what Seiko calls its field collection, which includes the likes of the SRPG fields, the SSK field GMTs, then you have the smaller case options of the field DNA with the SRPJ 81, and then on top of that, you have these watches, which appear more like pilot watches, which were released alongside many of these other field designs. Now, what I find strange about all of this is the categorization of these pieces as field watches. Now, field watches, pilot watches, you can see a lot of crossover in the characteristics of their designs, but they definitely do have their own codes that they follow. And we're not talking about different collectors that have miscategorized these watches. This is Seiko themselves calling these watches field watches, along with some other designs from the brand. If you look at these watches closer, they're definitely more aviation derived given the orientation triangle at 12, the enlarged minutes on the outside of the dial, and the broad loomed hands. Saying it out loud, it sounds like I just defined a figure watch more than a field watch. As a byproduct of all of this, these watches have become relatively forgotten by comparison to the unescapable mentioning of others adorned with the Seiko 5 badge. So as I mentioned, the 2 interpretations of this style come with differing takes. The first of the 2 is the SRPH series, which we will have demonstrated by the SRPH 29 and the 31 in this video. So they deliver a diameter of 39.4 millimeters, a thickness of 13.22 millimeters, and a lug-to-lug of 48.07 millimeters quoted by Seiko. Now, regardless, these watches will wear close to a true 40 millimeter on wrist, wearing slightly larger than its proposed diameter. In between the lugs is a width of 20 millimeters being accompanied by a nylon style strap with an orange lining. A lining that I'm uncertain of its actual material type because Seiko provides basically no information about this. The case gets a utilitarian brushed finish and drilled lugs as a benefit to those that want simple strap changing. Unlike the SNK 800 series with the traditional Seiko 5 crown position at 4 o'clock, these SRPHs shift back to the industry standard 3 o'clock position, which is unsigned and of the push-pull variety, yet still sustains 100 meters of water resistance for the full package, fulfilling on its sports classification. If you prefer a smaller size than 39mm, that is when the SRPJ 87 comes in, more closely recalling the dimensions of those former pieces like the SNK 803 of years prior, with a diameter of 36.4mm, a thickness of 12.5mm, and a lug-to-lug of 44.4mm, and a lug width of 18mm. Despite the strap on offer here being more of an embossed alligator style done using calfskin, the watch is all the same in its capability to its larger style adjacent sibling. When it comes down to it, the difference between many field watches and pilot's watches are more going to be details in the dial design that can be seen here through the relatively flat hardlex glass. A traditional field watch layout usually has either a 12-hour scale or a dual scale offering 24-hour military timekeeping in addition to the 12-hour scale. Like those original Seiko 5s, these new versions follow more of the format of a Type B pilot's watch dial with an inner 12-hour scale and 5-minute numerals towards the outer dial. Another point of distinction is the large orientation triangle at 12, a very traditional touch for pilot's watches. And despite abandoning some of the core 1960s principles of the Seiko 5 DNA, Seiko keeps with the tradition, mostly including a day-date display at 3. Lume is improved over the old Seiko 5s, with the broad hands getting a healthy dose, along with a Lume second hand counterweight and Lume 5-minute dots towards the outer hash marks. The SRPH incorporates further color with the orange plots at every 15 minutes, as well as an orange tip second hand. Now, the dials between the two case options are also slightly different, with the SRPH being of a more granular finish, while the SRPJ has a radial sun brush with a sunken polish ring at the center, splitting the hours from the outer minutes. The lume on both of these watches is quite good. The peculiar point, though, I do want to call out, and it was a bit of a head scratcher, is that the orientation triangle, which is traditionally lumed, has no luminescent material applied, which slightly defeats the purpose of its inclusion altogether if you know its use case in pilot watch design. Given that we have constantly been referring to the SNK 800 series thus far, it is probably appropriate to bring it up again when discussing the movement, given that this is the single largest area of objective improvement to those models who formerly used the 7S26 calibers. Now, the 7S26 became the most used Seiko mechanical movement by volume in its run that started back in 1996, before being discontinued and replaced by the hacking and hand winding 4R calibers. Inside both of these current production aviation pieces is the 4R36. The movement runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour, or 3 Hertz, has 24 joules and a 41-hour power reserve. It features bidirectional winding via Seiko's magic lever, which is a design of Seiko that allows for better winding efficiency in both directions. In addition, the caliber comes with Seiko's in-house anti-shock system, DiaShock, and uses an Editorial regulator for fine-tuning. Seiko tends to be very broad when quoting accuracy, with this one having a stated accuracy range of plus 45 seconds a day to minus 35 seconds per day. Although anecdotally, this underestimates the real-world figures quite a bit, with both of these falling well within that range in testing. So part of the charm of Seiko 5s, which also serves as their #1 challenge, is the sheer number of possibilities as a collector. In a family of watches whose aim is to have an answer to nearly every use case, there's oftentimes a shortcoming that comes with this intended end result, where the variety can inhibit some of the options from ever being rightfully appreciated or being overshadowed by others in the assortment. The former generation that fulfilled on similar principles became beloved by so many people by way of their versatility and phenomenal value. Yet by nearly every metric, these new SRPH and SRPJ models are better, with better water resistance. It has better lume, better movements, and improved finishing across the board. Yes, the prices are more expensive compared to the previous generation, but what isn't more expensive nowadays? And in addition to that, you are getting an objectively better product. Despite this, the carryover of excitement seems to have been missed during the baton pass. And as someone who's been talking about watches, specifically Seiko's, online for basically a decade now, I remember when the SNK 800 series were maybe the most talked about Seiko 5 watches out there. So to see that there hasn't been a direct successor to those that have gotten the same fanfare is kind of weird. On the surface, these watches are solid considerations for their price range, but given their classification and getting lost within the broader Seiko lineup being called field watches and not fully committing to an intended identity, they've become more of an afterthought than a definitive choice. Some of this also needs to be blamed on how these watches were rolled out alongside others in the 5 series, and that many SNK 800s could still be found in different non-authorized channels at the time of the unveiling of these. As where it currently stands, these are the entry-level aviation watches that Seiko has on offer within the Seiko 5 family, even if Seiko themselves have failed to come close to ever making that claim. All right, guys, that is our closer look here today at these SRPHs and these SRPJ pilot watches. So have you had a chance to ever take a look at these watches? I just found them in this weird middle ground where not that many people talk about them. And I remember the time when the SNK 800s were always talked about. To see that there is not a successor to those models where these on paper are absolutely that and better across the board, it is strange to me because I do remember the time where those were some of those talked about Seiko 5s out there. But what are your guys' take on these watches? Do you like them? Do you not like them? Leave some comments down below. I know there are some people out there definitely will watch this video that probably own one of these watches. So if you have a personal ownership story that you can share, that is always helpful as well in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Another great way to help the channel is checking out teddybaldessar.com. teddybaldessar.com is an authorized dealer of over 35 brands. Every purchase from teddybaldessar.com comes with quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. Also, how we're able to keep doing what we're doing here, produce content every single week, is through selling watches. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd absolutely love to have your business. Keeps us going, and we love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.